Get in rooms with people that you want to be like. Like, you have to change your surroundings. And that's what I did. And it opened my eyes. And I've had iterations of this over the last number of years where I've gotten in different rooms and I meet different people that elevate my thinking.
Welcome to the Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy podcast, where we help entrepreneurs like you exponentially build wealth through passive income to live a life of freedom and prosperity. Are you tired of paying too much in taxes, gambling your future on the stock market, and want to learn about hidden strategies for making your money work for you? And now your host, Dave Wolcott, serial entrepreneur and author of the best-selling book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode on Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy. Today's episode is a powerful one, and not just because of the investing wisdom that gets dropped. My guest is someone I deeply respect, not just as an operator and entrepreneur, but as a husband, father, and mission-driven. Whitney Sewell is back on the show, a repeat guest and a man whose journey from military service to law enforcement to real estate syndication is both inspiring and impactful. But what makes Whitney's story truly extraordinary is how he's built a business around a mission, helping families adopt children through Omna Foundation, which he and his wife created after adopting 5 children themselves. In this episode, we dive deep into Whitney's humble beginnings and the mindset shift that changed his financial future and how Rich Dad Poor Dad played a key role. His transition from police officer to podcast host to raising capital and building LifeBridge Capital, the challenges and hard lessons from the last 24 months in real estate, and why he's more optimistic than ever about the opportunities ahead. His family first approach to leadership, legacy, and what it really means to be wealthy. And lastly, how he's built systems for intentional time with his kids and why compounding family capital matters just as much as financial returns. This isn't just a conversation about money. It's about mission, meaning, and life intentionally. Whether you're an investor, a parent, or someone seeking to build a life of impact, this episode will challenge and inspire you. And if you've been enjoying the show, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And now on to the show. Whitney, welcome to the show.
Honored to connect with you again, Dave. Glad to be here.
Whitney, it's always grateful to connect. I learn a lot from you. You've just really shown an amazing journey. You've inspired others, and your philanthropic efforts and what you've done with orphans and adoption is just really, truly amazing. And I think people can learn a lot from that. And actually, on this show, we can fully proclaim that you have beaten me with now 5 kids, and I've got 4 kids. So congratulations on your 5th. That's really amazing news, and really grateful for you and your family.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the Lord had different plans than we did there, but we have 5 now.
Yeah.
So completely unexpected.
Yeah, that was exactly when we had triplets. I mean, that's exactly it. The Lord had different plans.
I cannot imagine.
It's just like something you read about in the newspaper, you see on the TV, and it was like, I mean, even to this day, it still seems just, amazing that happened. But congratulations, that's really cool. And, watching kids, like I actually got to become a grandfather just 5 months ago. And
congratulations to you. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. And watching your own child have a child is it's really amazing. And I'll tell you, it really makes me think, like it puts it really front and center, legacy, right? A lot of times we're talking about legacy and how important that is and everything. But when you really see that next generation, kind of coming up like that, wow, it's really amazing. And then you can really get more clarity in terms of, how you're structuring your investing, what's meaningful for you and your family. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today, as I know, values and things are important to you. You're a repeat guest on the show as well. So congrats for that. And for those who haven't really heard you, maybe on on our past episode or on your podcast, tell us a little bit how you got into investing in the real estate side and really the alternative side of things.
I'll share a little more than I normally do, Dave. Knowing what you're after here, I'll go back just a little bit further to share. I really had some of the worst examples financially growing up. And we had no money. There was no one in my family who did any kind of investing other than my grandfather, who was World War II veteran. He died like 2 years ago at 102 years old. But, he came home from World War II and was hired by a chain grocery store that was really just getting started. They're actually really big now. But at the time, they were brand new. He worked there, retired from there, and then he went and worked at the nursing home or the funeral home and worked there until he was like in his mid-90s. I mean, he was burying people for 20 years that were younger than him. It's just an amazing work ethic. But man, he just saved, right? And he's the only one. He was seen as somebody wealthy in our community of one stoplight, little bitty, right? But really, he knew nothing about investing, and he didn't do anything but save. I mean, just they wouldn't spend anything they didn't have to. So I learned a lot from him. But my immediate family, my father, horrible examples financially growing up. And I tended in that direction as I became a teenager. I just spent money that I didn't have and didn't even think about it and whatever. It was really focused more on, the vehicle I was driving or whatever it may be than really thinking long term in what this is really costing me, or, hey, I want to get married, in the near future. And what does that look like financially? How am I going to provide? And I wasn't trained to even think that way. Okay. And so, years later, the Lord had a plan for my life that I couldn't have imagined, but March of 2001, I signed up for the military. Had no idea what was about to happen 6 months later, right? 9/11 happens, and all of a sudden I find myself spending a year in Iraq. And unfortunately, not everyone made it home in my squad. And it's 20 years ago this year. It's hard to believe. But come home from Iraq, and the military, it helped me to grow up a little bit as a young man, in a big way, I would say. Just, man, what exposure. I mean, you can't give up when you're a battle buddy, or, people next to you are expecting you to perform, right, in some of the hardest situations. And so that really just helped shape my mindset in a big way. That's helped me as an entrepreneur and father, and all these things. But I came home and thought, what in the world can I do? I mean, this money would burn and hold in my pocket. I didn't know what to do with it. And it seemed like a lot at the time. And now I look back and think, well, it really wasn't a lot, but I'd never had any money, blew most of it, in ways that, shouldn't, just wasted it. But I got home, tried to figure out what I was going to do. I got hired by Kentucky State Police. I loved working the road as a police officer. I loved being a first responder, the uniform, the discipline, the structure. However, I got married, found out it was going to be hard to support a family on $28,000 a year. I mean, this had never crossed my mind, honestly, before this time. So at this point, my wife and a brand new bride, our goal was for her to be able to stay at home when we had children. And we thought, that's going to be difficult. That's going to be really difficult on 28,000 or so a year. So I started seeking what could I do to supplement our income? Because this really felt like, Dave, that's all I was qualified to do. I didn't think there's any, I hadn't been to college. I didn't have any kind of special training other than wearing the uniform. And so I really felt helpless, I just thought this is my career. I'm going to be wearing this uniform. And then I don't know if I saw some ads or what, but I finally read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was like, wait a minute, all these people, this many people have built wealth in real estate. Like, I can do something. I still couldn't ever imagine being a millionaire or like having any kind of wealth. But my thought was, hey, if we could have $200 extra a month, that'd be game changing for us at that time. And so we bought a couple triplexes, made a ton of mistakes, learned so much the hard way. A long story short, I became a federal agent. That moved us to Virginia, where we still live now. So I increased my income, but still through W-2, I started training horses professionally. So I was federal agent during the day and horse trainer at night. And then, Dave, my wife and I were on the beach one fall, and we asked ourselves the question, hey, is what we're doing right now going to get us where we want to go 5, even 10 years from now? The obvious answer just smacked us in the face was no. We came home, sold the farm, literally, within 2.5 months. We're moving out of our farm. I'll never forget pulling down that driveway and just my wife and I just crying, thinking, Lord, is this the right thing? It just doesn't feel like it. Our church family, our family, everybody thought we were crazy. Like, what in the world are you all doing? Because it didn't look right from the outside, right? But we knew if we want to build wealth, we have to make decisions that other people are not willing to make, especially that was in our tribe at the time, right? And so we said, hey, like, it's now or never. let's do it. If we want to be able to build wealth, if we want to be able to change the future for our family, if we want to be able to give, like we want to be able to give and be generous, like we've got to do something different. And I knew real estate could do that. And so we sold the farm, we moved into town, rented a little house. I started a daily podcast, which you've been on, I'm sure more than once as well, where I just started interviewing as many people as I could. And actually I started going to some conferences, Dave, where I met people who they were building wealth in real estate. They were buying 100-unit complexes and only been in the business a year or so. And again, the blinders came off to like, wait a minute. Hey, if they can do that, there's no reason I can't do that. It was almost that simple. And so it was just like, then it was just hard as I could go then. We started the daily podcast. I started meeting people, increasing my network quickly. I would do every other Monday. I was off work from the federal agent position. I would record 12 to 15 interviews a day, just back to back to back as hard as I could go. Absolutely insanity. But our business started to grow. I mean, like things started. It took a couple years of just the chaos before we actually did our first deal, syndicated our first deal, $20 million project. It was, so I look back and think that's just madness that we even tried that, but it worked. The Lord blessed that. But to back up, when we moved to Roanoke, Dave, we heard first weekend we were here, we heard a pastor talk about how they had adopted and how there's 150 million orphans in the world. And this was brand new information. My new bride and I, we'd never thought about this before. One stoplight town we grew up in, we didn't know anybody that had anything to do with adoption before. But on our way home, we thought, well, that just seems like a great opportunity to grow our family. It seemed that simple. I'm so thankful for our ignorance in the adoption process at that time. Within a week, we applied to adopt from Ethiopia. 2 years later, our first son, Samuel, comes home from Ethiopia. And about 10 months later, Elijah came to our family through adoption. A few years later, Eden Joy, then Selah, and then just a few months ago, Grace as well. So now 5 children through adoption. But what the Lord did was just stir in my wife and I to want to help families, other families, to be able to adopt that can't afford to. Unfortunately, it's 50 to 75 grand to bring a child home, or even more to bring a child home through adoption. And most families that would be great parents say, Whitney, that's more than I make in a year. How can we even start? And I just kept hearing, the more I started speaking about it and talking about it, more people would come up and say, Whitney, we would love to adopt, but we just can't. And so we started a foundation that helps them do that. And that became the big mission behind LifeBridge Capital, was to help fund adoptions. And now we've partnered with almost 50 families who have brought children home, through adoption. So that's our big mission. That's our big why. It's called Omna Foundation, OMNAH. And if you know of a family that is trying to adopt but can't afford to, we'd love for them, to apply there and see if we can help them. So, yeah, that's a lot, Dave.
Yeah. Wow. Now, such an amazing journey. And it's so interesting, right? Because, this is why I pointed this out in my book, in the Holistic Wealth Journey, right? Is that in the second phase, right, of the journey, you need to focus on improving your financial IQ. Because this is really the root cause of this issue, is that none of us were taught, financial education, right? No matter whether you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or whatever it is, it's just not taught anywhere. And so I think we're all a bit kind of handicapped, right, when it comes to this. And then it takes kind of going down a particular path for so many years and then having this light bulb moment, like taking the purple pill or something, or getting a good podcast, and you say, wow, there's a different path here. I can invest in real estate. And why is it called an alternative asset anyway? I mean, it's probably one of the oldest asset classes that's ever been around.
Right.
In the first place.
Why is it called that?
Right? Why is it all? Yeah, because the financial services industry labeled it that way, right? Because of their agenda. So it's interesting, but it's great that you were able to, become empowered by getting educated, and then you actually took action, right? And you saw results. And it's not always an easy path, but you made it work.
I'll clarify there. I think we took a lot of action before we were ever educated, just to be honest.
Yeah.
We did. Like the podcast, people used to talk about, well, you started a daily syndication show and you never syndicated anything. I'm like, well, call me crazy, but we're pushing forward. You know what I mean? So, anyway.
Well, the opposite.
We're thankful.
You just think about it, though. The opposite is so many people get stuck with, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
and you're just kind of caught in the weeds. What deal is good, which is not? And in fact, I kind of started down that path also when I thought, hey, real estate would be good to invest in. And I started looking at some active opportunities. But man, you start what ifing the heck out of everything. Right. And you realize how much competition there is there. So sometimes it's not bad to just take action and, not be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah. 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 You do have to remove the fear. There's still going to be some there, but you can't be afraid of making mistakes. I tell my boys all the time, well, you're going to mess up. If you're pushing yourself, you're going to make mistakes. No doubt about it. And you have to learn from it. You have to be able to move forward.
Whitney, what does wealth mean to you?
Wealth to me is being able to spend my time like I want. And when I say that, I mean, like, I think of my time, what is there, 84,600 seconds in a day, 600 or 700. Anyway, if you think of those, I use this analogy sometimes. If you think of those like dollars and they don't roll over to the next day, it's like, okay, did you invest those today or did you waste them? Right. And having some financial wealth allows me to have a lot more decisions about how I invest those seconds. Right. And for me, it's investing in my children, investing in my marriage, investing in our church. And being able to do that is wealth that I never imagined being able to have, Dave. Growing up, I wasn't raised that way. I didn't think that way. I wasn't taught to think that way. It wasn't exampled for me. But from the examples I've seen from speaking on stages and meeting so many people that seem so successful, like, man, you look wealthy, but I know what your home life is like, and I know enough to see you don't really have true wealth. There's a massive cost they've paid or sacrifice to gain financial wealth, and it's important. Dollars are important, no doubt about it, because those allow me to invest that time, like I'm talking about. But man, they've sacrificed so much true wealth for this financial piece, right? So for me, I want to be able to invest that time. I want to be able to grow those relationships that are most important for Dave. When you and I are 75, 80 years old and we're sitting on the park bench and you say, Whitney, how was it? And I say, Dave, it was perfect. Which obviously it may not be perfect, but whatever those metrics are that would have made it perfect, I want to be focused on those things.
Yeah, no, that's such a great definition because I think it's tough for people, right? And especially as we teach, our kids and other generations, right? They've got social media in their face every day. That's really teaching them that, rich is something different, right? Rich is the fast sports car, the material things, going out like all the time, and nowhere are they learning, right? These important things about value. And the way I kind of think about it is it's all about freedom, really. I think, we talk about financial freedom, but if I put 100 million in your bank account tomorrow, like, how does that actually change your life? Right?
It's Dave Wolcott here. Let me ask you something. Are you tired of the same old financial advice that leaves you spinning your wheels? If you're ready to discover the real secrets the ultra wealthy use to build unstoppable wealth, then I've got something just for you. My new book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy, is your ticket to learning the proven strategies that the top 1% don't want you to know. This book isn't just about money. It's about building a life of purpose, freedom, and lasting impact. And I want to give you a free copy. Visit holisticwealthstrategy.com and get yours today. It's time to level up your financial game and create the future you deserve.
It means what? You don't have to work again. So that means you have freedom of time to spend your time as you choose, which means that today you're not spending that time wisely. You're not investing those seconds as you thought about. And what's fascinating about doing the deep work and doing this thinking is that you realize that you can actually change your life and gain those freedoms today without having to wait until you're 65 or waiting until you're 8-figure, 9-figure wealth, right? Because a lot of that could be intentional rewiring about, I want to spend more time with my kids. It's just that simple. Well, go ahead and do it, create some habits, create some goals, go do that,
Yeah, if you haven't been consistent about building those relationships from when they're little, like, don't expect it to just immediately turn on when they're 18 or 25 or, right? And so I want to be intentional now with that. I even just, because it's the daily consistent actions that add up to yeah, it's a compounding effect, right? Just like just like dollars. But in the relationships, in something we've been doing that my kids love is having like a quarterly time with each of them independently, like one-on-one, me and them, where there's no phones. There's no electronics, but hey, we just go do something fun. But it may be just a hike. It may be, we actually, I don't know, go do something that just is fun together. So it builds relationship. But then we go have a meal together where there's conversation, right? And I try to be very intentional about just asking some questions during those conversations. But what I've noticed over time, hey, they know that when these questions come up about life, they know they're going to have this time with dad. Right, like that's coming up, and they're excited about that time. Hey, Dad, when is that? And so it's building the relationships on a consistent basis like that. Even something as simple, Dave, I found my boys have been taking guitar for a couple of years, and when that started to happen, initially it was like, well, my wife's too busy to be able to take them to guitar. I'm just going to put it in my calendar. My team knows I'm not available during that time. I'm going to do it. But what I found is, hey, that time driving there and the time driving back, it's been life-changing, I think, for them and for me to have that intentional time with them. Hey, we're talking about how prepared are they for this guitar lesson, right? Afterwards, I'm following up. Hey, how did that go? I asked them to rate themselves. I'll rate them and say, hey, how could we be better prepared? So it's just like having them think through things like that. Hey, how was I prepared? Did I come prepared? Did I have these things ready? And something that simple, but also we may listen to a podcast or part of one that I've picked out on the way, and then just talk about it, right? Or we took the boys to the Dominican Republic recently, and there's some things we were listening to just so they could learn more about the country, and me too. Many great conversations around listening to something like that for 5 minutes, and then they just have questions. But that time in the car together allowed just space for that. So being intentional with the space, it doesn't have to be, hey, you're actually going down, and sitting and, asking big, it could just be in the car consistently, right? They know they're going to have that time.
Yeah, love it. Have you read the book by Jim Shields, The Boardroom, Family Boardroom?
So I did a series with him on the podcast, and I actually gave that book away to every listener that wanted it. Yeah, and I would still do that. But yeah, that's where that initially came from. He lays that out, the importance of that time, with the kids. I love that.
Yeah, great book for the listeners if you want to check it out. It's called The Family Boardroom by Jim Shields. He was on a previous episode for us as well. But yeah, a really good one there. Whitney, tell us about, I know you also have an important, really, philosophy around, leadership in the household. Right. And, what does that actually mean to you? And especially as you think about, legacy with your family and future generations.
Yeah, I love the question, Dave. I love this topic. We're actually just building a course to help men, like just with this, right? Something, almost next to nothing cost-wise, but just I want to help men to lead well in the home because I know that couples that share, say, rituals, I just report higher marital satisfaction, right? Or, I think it's easy to see that CEOs typically have higher divorce rates. And it doesn't have to be that way. And for me, I want other men to be as famous at the dining room table as they are at the boardroom table. Right. I want them to be able to think about ways to think through that because it doesn't have to be the opposite. And people say, well, we got to have this work-life balance. For me, there's not much balance. It's like they do consume one another. Right. I feel like, it's so easy to see your business consuming your entire life. And for me, it's like, well, it's not worth that. If it costs you your family, like I will literally go flip burgers. I hope I would anyway. I say I will go flip burgers at McDonald's if it meant my marriage or it meant, my children, my relationship with them. Say we're doing all of this for them, but are you really? Does your calendar reflect that? And, if you handed me your calendar and I looked back at, the last month, I'm going to see where your priorities are, like really quickly. Right. It's going to be so obvious where you're committing your time and to what your priorities are. And so for me, I want those things on the calendar, like time with the kids. No, I've not always done it perfect, but I'm trying to be ultra intentional with my kids and my spouse. And, do I have a date night on the calendar? Am I talking to her about all these things? Because I'll tell you, one of my best counselor outside of the Lord is my wife. And over the years of business, even the first few years that were really difficult, she was still my best advisor, even though she's not in business, even though she couldn't care less about real estate. she had insight, intuition, and I think just from the Holy Spirit that, where she would ask questions or she would say something, I'm like, oh, I haven't thought about that thing, right? But if we hadn't had the time, Dave, where it's set aside, and at the time where I was just getting the business started, it was every morning from like 5 to 6 in the morning. But that was time for us to connect and pray together and talk about the kids and talk about the schedule or the travel, right? But it was that consistent communication that was so important. Another thing that's been so key for us is the mission, and a mission to help more families to adopt. And so even when the business was not doing anything, and it was just, we were just spending and spending and spending, trying to keep it all going initially, that mission is what really kept us going as a family. Like, even painting the picture for the kids the best they could understand. It's like, no, we want to help more families to be able to adopt, even though we're not yet. Like, that is the driving force, right, for us together as a family. And even though my wife couldn't care less about real estate, I could have been doing lots of things. She is 110% behind the mission to help more families adopt, right? And so having that common mission gives us just a common purpose behind, hey, all the time, Dad, or is spending, talking about me, get it doing these things, right? No, there's a bigger mission. It's not just so we can have a fancier home or a vehicle or whatever it may be. No, especially once the foundation got going and we start seeing these children come to these families, it's like, wow, Lord, like, thank you for using us in this little way, to help these families. And so that became a big part of our entire family. One other thing I'll leave with you that I'm thinking of is helping. One thing that really helped me, and I love helping other men, is think about like 5 core areas of your life that you want to be intentional about. You get more than that, it's really difficult to do any of it, right? But what are these like 5 core areas? For me, it may be my faith, my marriage, my children, my business, philanthropy, things like that. And then I want to lay out, hey, who can help me with these things? Who are mentors in these specific areas? What's the time commitment? And one thing that I've learned recently that I didn't do early on is think about who is affected by each of these areas. And so instead of just thinking about, say, my health, if that's an area, how it affects me personally, no, think about the other people that are affected by your health, or if you're not healthy. And then that just adds a little more accountability to me to, hey, I need to be out there exercising in the morning, or whatever that area is. But to spend the hard time to sit back and think and really, figure out, hey, I actually use the example earlier about, us sitting on the park bench, figure out what are your perfect life metrics? What are the things that you're going to wish you had done, right? The areas you had focused in. Well, guess what? Now's the time, right, to do that and to figure that out and to be able to be intentional, even if it's 30 minutes a week to start with. Start now and figure out what those areas are.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to frame it, really. And I think work-life balance is a bit of a myth, right? Yeah. I think a better way to describe it is more about harmony, right? Because there's ebbs and flows, and some of those different, like, some could be the 5 F's, those 5 important areas, whatever those might be for you. But yeah, figuring out how to work through the ups and downs of those. And then I really love that concept, really, of investing and compounding. But just think about it even outside of your financial capital, because really true wealth, right? We know that it's more than financial capital. It's spiritual capital. It's intellectual capital. It's emotional capital. It's physical capital, right? These are all the important things that we want to have in terms of a legacy. So yes, how can we invest in those things? And I like to think about it in terms of just 10x, right? Like if you were to achieve 10x health right now, and you could bring 10x health and energy to your game, what is that going to do for the people around you, for your business, your work, your relationships, your kids, right? I mean, it's huge. So, making those investments and kind of compounding those over time is really great. Whitney, let's transition a bit into, what you're seeing on the real estate side, because I know a lot of listeners are probably, curious. It's been such a challenging time, really, in the entire commercial real estate market, right? Because of the unprecedented moves by the Fed, really increasing interest rates kind of, I think, started this whole, challenge. And, do you think we've hit the bottom? Are we kind of moving through that, or where are we in the cycle right now?
Where are we in the cycle? Am I supposed to have an answer for that?
I knew you would bring your crystal ball here. Yeah.
Dave, it's been a very different, say, last 24 months, for us and for LifeBridge. And, let me go back 24 months or so. And, right before that, man, we had the busiest few years of our business, right? And it just grown really fast. Some years, just early on in our business where we're buying 100+ million a year, in real estate. And I just never imagined that. And then all of a sudden, it's like almost like, nothing. And we couldn't make anything work. And, the first 6 months or so of that, we were really discouraged. 8 months, 10 months, even 20, even 12 months. We were like, what is going on? We see all these other people doing all these deals, and we couldn't make it work. Obviously, like you said, interest rates went up, and we're just like, wow, are we going to have to lay people off, or what's going on? Like, we can't make that deal work, or in deal flow just almost cut off to nothing, right? However, let's go 6 more months, into that, 18 months into that process or so. The more that came out about actually what was happening to so many operators, and obviously interest rates and their rate caps expiring, all these issues, things that started to happen that are just collapsing a number of projects financially, we were like, Lord, thank you. Like, you have protected us in such a massive way that we didn't do that deal, or we didn't do that deal, or we did, I'm so grateful, right? Or we didn't have more floating rate debt than we did, like so many, unfortunately, operators did have. So all that to say, now, over the last, I think, 2 to 3 months, I think we have seen more deal flow than we've seen in the last 24 months. Probably in the last 3 months, we've seen more deals than we have combined the last 24 before that. And so that's hopeful in a big regard. Like that gives us some energy. We're excited about that. We have had a couple good exits, recently, projects that we've sold that have done really well for us and our investors. But acquisitions, we bought one project recently, like a 50 unit with some retail on the bottom, brand new deal, but only because, we don't typically buy one that small, but it was right across the intersection from properties that we already owned. So it made sense for us. But outside of that, it's been really slim. However, we've sent out a few LOIs this past week, and when we were talking about yesterday, that seemed pretty promising. And it's like, okay, we can start to see some things picking up, but it's also changed our expectations for returns for projects as well. Even our, just like measuring investor sentiment as far as, are they ready to invest and things like that? Because most seems like they're still sitting on the sideline, as far as waiting to see what happens type of thing. Projects, we changed our buy box, as well, where, we really started with heavy value add, older vintage type properties. And we still own a number of those. And many of them have been really good to us. Some not as good, but mostly okay. And, but now we're much more focused on newer assets, more Class A projects and maybe some value add, but not near the lift of, say, late 70s vintage like we've had a number of. And so it's caused us, I think, in many ways, Dave, though, to improve our operations in so many ways that we maybe weren't before. It's helped us to grow up corporately in a lot of ways. We've had time as well to really focus on a number of those things where we weren't doing deals, where we're buying, if we're buying like 4 to 6 deals a year, it's hard to focus on some of those corporate things that need to get done, like it was, especially early on when you're, it's hard to keep up with the growth almost, right? So it was a good pause for us, looking back. And I think the Lord had many plans there because we grew up internally and corporately, and just our skills on the team as well grew in a lot of ways. And so now we look at deals through a different lens. Through the lessons learned, and our buy box has changed. Our the way we're working with investors have changed, and so it's ultimately been good for us long term, for this to happen. And so all I'd say, I feel very promising or encouraged by this next year. I don't expect interest rates just to go back down to where they were probably this year, but I do still expect there to be deals to be had, or let's say, deals that are still producing a decent return. I don't expect, say, that 25, 30% IRR. That may still happen, but that's not what I'm projecting, anyway. But hey, if we can hit a 15 to 18 even IRR on a lot of these projects, we feel like it's still a really good market to buy into.
Yeah. The biggest growth always comes with the biggest challenges. That's for sure. So, and I think that the more, cycles that investors and operators go through, right, that just makes you more resilient. Like you said, you've kind of changed your underwriting criteria, your buy box, and things like that. So it just really improves things. And I would say that, it's the same thing on our side, right? We're seeing, more deal flow and everything, harder to find those great nuggets out there that we want to really go after. But I think there's going to definitely be some, this year, and getting some deals on the buy side. The other thing I would comment on, I think that's really interesting, just my perspective, but I feel as if you read between the tea leaves, all right, what's going on with, the broader markets right now, I think they're trying to force the hand of the Fed to actually drop interest rates. With tariffs, what's kind of going on economically. So if the market, stocks continue to go down, and then there's a flight for safety into bonds, right? And the Fed's got all of these maturities kind of coming up, right, on treasuries that, I mean, it's a big nut for them to pay. Right, at these rates, right? So if they can bring the rates down, like in a substantial way, I think that could be a massive opportunity for us on the commercial real estate side, right? Because
Oh my goodness.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is really going to help all of those like crazy expensive rate caps. It's going to increase NOI. And then, we're going to kind of get back into maybe a normalization, right, of rate caps.
It will change it drastically. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, people will go back into buying mode, like Matt, and selling mode.
Yeah. Are you seeing that as well? Would you concur with that?
I do concur with that. I guess I want us to be able to produce a consistent, fair return, almost no matter what the market's doing. You know what I mean? Like, I want us to be able to just like be able to figure it out, find decent deals, things that, not shiny, not excitable. Just I want to just be able to be predictable for investors, right? So the more I look back, even over the last few years too, in talking to investors, it's just like they've learned some hard lessons as well, right? There's so many deals they're in that, man, they've lost everything. They're not getting distributions, and while and they've learned, many of them, it's like, man, they saw that 25% IRR or whatever it may be, and said, oh man, they got in that. And then they lose all their money, right? And so now when I talk to them about, hey, like, we're not shooting for a 25, we're shooting for a 15, 18 maybe, and we just wanted to just be consistent and be reliable, and no surprise. Like, more of them are like, hey, that's what we want to, like they just want to be able to know that it's there. So to answer your question, I agree with that, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. But even if it doesn't happen, I still want us to be able to go find solid deals that are still producing.
Yeah. I mean, every family office that I talk to, I mean, their buy box, they're literally just looking for a 14 to 16% IRR, and it's not sexy, right? It's all about consistency. And then if you can actually, under promise, right, and then over deliver on that, right, then you've got opportunity on the upside. But some of these ones that look really frothy, people are trying to swing for the fences, and it just doesn't work that way, right? You're going to take on some more inherent risk. I think that's the way to at it, right? And there are a lot of opportunities like that, right? And that's why we have angel, we have venture, right? And it's an entire kind of stack in terms of your risk profile. But just make sure you understand, you track to your own investor DNA and risk, and make sure you're not throwing everything at this thing so you don't bet the farm. As they say, right? And put all your eggs in one basket, right? And then I think you'll be fine. You want to just build out that base, right, of the solid performing real estate, right? That's steady and true.
That's right. That stands out so much in a market like this. When you're still paying out distributions or you're still performing, people figure out really quickly, hey, these guys know how to operate real estate.
Yeah. Whitney, if you could give just one piece of advice to the audience about how they could accelerate their wealth trajectory, what would it be?
There's so many things that come to mind, but if I have to say one, get in rooms with people that you want to be like. like you have to change your surroundings. And that's what I did. And it opened my eyes. And I've had iterations of this over the last number of years where I've gotten in different rooms and I meet different people that elevate my thinking. Right? I mean, I'm so many levels above, where I was at, 10 years ago, and especially before that. I mean, but it's being around people that that exposure to see, wait a minute, I didn't even know that was possible, right? Or if you can do that, I can figure that out. There's no reason I can't do that too. So get in the rooms where people are that you want to be like, so you can like change the way you think.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, I do that myself in masterminds. I spend six figures a year, and that's why we created our own mastermind, for people. But, if you're thinking about that as a cost, it's the whole wrong way to think about it. But it's really the biggest asset is really yourself. If you can invest in yourself, and you're exactly right. You could literally be like one relationship away from the biggest opportunity of your lifetime. And you don't even know it. But if you keep remaining with, the same circle of friends, the same input, you're never going to be able to jump to those new levels.
No doubt about it. It's happened so many times to me, Dave. And at first, my first mentor, I think he was 12 grand. And at the time we didn't have the money. I thought, man, is this the right decision? Should we try to figure this out? Best decision I ever made. And I'm like you now, I'm spending a lot more now on masterminds and mentors than I used to make in a year at my W-2. I mean, easy, because I see the value. I know the value of being in the rooms with those people, right? I mean, it's just changed my life and drastically, and many others now as well, even through the foundation, our family. And so, no doubt.
Yeah. Love it. Whitney, always great getting together, and appreciate all your pearls of wisdom for the audience that you shared today. And if people want to learn more about what you're doing at LifeBridge or to connect with you on the adoption side, maybe that's a path. What's the best place for people to connect with you?
WhitneySewell.com. That's the best place. You can learn about all those things there. But I tell you what, you can also, I have a free little mini course that helps every man lead their family in creating a family mission statement. Where it's so important to us to have a mission statement for our business. We hire by it, we fire by it, we make decisions by it. Well, why wouldn't you have one for your family? So I encourage you. It's free. I encourage you to do it. I'd love to hear what your mission statement is as a family. Go there. But anyway, you can learn everything about me there.
Awesome. Thanks again, Whitney.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wealth Strategy Secrets. If you'd like to get a free copy of the book, go to holisticwealthstrategy.com. That's holisticwealthstrategy.com. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming opportunities at Pantheon, please visit pantheoninvest.com. That's pantheoninvest.com.